The building here. I'm sorry you cannot see it. It's under renovation now. When they will be done with it, it will look like this. This part of the building was sold. It was sold. There is a hostel there and some restaurants. Also, Mleczarnia is a very cool cafe. I really recommend it to everybody. They have really nice coffee. Yeah, and of course the synagogue. Last but not least. So the history of Jews in Wrocław is, in my private opinion, a very typical history of Jews in Central and Eastern Europe. At the very beginning, they were not allowed to live inside the city, because in Middle Ages, cities were being given so-called privileges. So those privileges were usually dealing with some legal affairs or monopolies, etc. And one of those, yes, because the kings, they wanted to gain popularity among the people, so they were just, for example, allowing city to, yes, giving some monopolies, etc. So another privilege of this kind was called privilege of intolerance. So the medieval city council didn't have to accept any infidels in the city. So any Jews, Muslims, or any other people. It was guaranteeing also like peace, because people were not, getting along very well in villages when somebody was different than the majority. Yes. So as I told you, now we are outside the city, moat. So we are outside the medieval city center. So there was a famous tavern here outside the city, and this tavern was called White Stork Tavern because there was a meadow around and there were many storks, so those nice white birds. So this tavern was very popular among Jewish merchants that were coming to Wrocław. So when years passed and those old medieval laws were no longer valid, and when city started to grow, the Jewish community center was located in here because it was already a place popular among Jewish merchants. Yes, so there was a couple of synagogues, like little synagogues, or also Jews prayed in private houses. So the Prussian authorities, the Germans always like to have everything organized and in order. So Prussian authorities forced Jewish community to build one synagogue instead of having many. So they have built this one in 1828. This synagogue was erected because of this tavern and the white storks that were living in this place. It is called the Synagogue of the White Stork. Yes, so this synagogue was built in 1828, and it was designed by Karl Ferdinand Langhans. So that's like Langhans Jr. we call him, son of Karl Gotthard, the constructor of Brandenburg Gate. Yes, so in this synagogue now there is a very cool museum. I encourage you to go and see it. It's for free. Yes, back to 19th century. Yes, this synagogue quickly became too small for the Jewish population because there were so many Jewish people. And the other thing was that the liberal Jews and conservative Jews, the Orthodox, they didn't really get along very well, so they didn't want to pray in one place. Especially the Orthodox had some problem with the liberals, and they just never wanted to pray in one place with the liberals. So the liberal part of the community had to build another synagogue, a so-called new synagogue. So it was like a couple of 100 meters in this direction, so-called new synagogue. It was the biggest synagogue in Germany, by the way. It was built in the end of 19th century, and then this community was still growing bigger and bigger. Up to the moment when the Nazis came to power. When they did, there was a so-called Crystal Night, so a night between 9th and 10th of November 1938, when the Nazis attacked Jewish citizens and their shops, flats, etc. They were breaking many windows on this night, and a lot of glass was broken on that night. So that's why it is called Crystal Night, because there was broken glass everywhere. So during Crystal Night, they put so-called new synagogue on fire. It was in flames for 3 days because they forbid firefighters to extinguish this fire. So it was burning till it burned down completely. They didn't put this synagogue on fire, which is very ironic. They were just afraid that the flames would spread to some buildings around. They didn't want, to cause any unnecessary damage. So they just left it. That's why this building survived the war. So just before the Nazis came to power, there was around 70,000 Jewish people in Wrocław. Most of them were killed during Holocaust. So in this place here, a square in the front of synagogue, so-called Umschlagplatz was located. So Umschlagplatz is a square where Jews were being gathered and then taken to the death camps. So there's a railway station like a couple of 100 meters in this direction. So they were taken from this square to the death camps. Yes, the other interesting thing is that every Jewish citizen that was, being sent a message from Gestapo, Nazi secret police. In those letters, they were asked to take money for the journey. So they paid for their transportation to the gas chambers. 125 marks each of them. So yes, after Second World War, it was very, very surprising that there was again a very big number of Jewish people came to Wrocław. It is because, as I told you, people from Western Ukraine came in, many Polish, but also many Jewish. Many Jews survived the war in those territories. So after Second World War, there was 17,000 Jewish people. So again, quite a lot. In 1968, however, there was a very big anti-Semitic propaganda in Soviet Union, because in 1 year earlier there was a war between Israel and Arabic countries that surround Israel, so Jordania, Syria, Egypt. And because Israel has been an ally of the United States, of course the Soviets had to pick up the other side of the conflict to support. So they were supporting, those Arabic states, and they were like anti-Israeli, anti-Semitic. So then this very big anti-Semitic agenda, started. And on this occasion, many Jewish citizens left Poland, Soviet Union, Czech Republic, or Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and other communist countries, because they just, didn't feel very welcome anymore. So they were even given passports. So when they were given passports, and also thousands of Polish people pretended that, oh, we are Jewish. Everybody was trying to make up some story that he or she is Jewish because everybody wanted to get a head out of him, and not to live in a communist country. So that was fact. Thousands of people left Poland in 1968, and most of the Jews. So now in this community there are 300 members, like people that come here regularly. There is far more of them that are just not religious, like for example my friend Arthur, who has Jewish parents but just doesn't really care about anything, and especially religion, so he's not a member. However, there are 300 members. Their community is located here. They have some apartments and offices in there. There is a kosher restaurant, believe me or not, you cannot see it now. And there is a synagogue, and this synagogue is used for prayers. Those 3 windows on the first floor. This synagogue is simply too big, so only some important big holidays take place in this synagogue. Usually some concerts, some cultural events, and when they do regular prayers, they go in the small synagogue there. Yes. Any questions, anybody?